To the distinguished panel here, I think we're on behalf of all of us, we're delighted to have the opportunity to come and participate both in the topic and overall with the Forum of Asian Women in Leadership in 2018. What we propose to do is to identify and talk through a couple of topics that we believe resonates with us, that we believe will hopefully resonate with you as we talk about unconscious bias, stereotypes and prejudices as well. We certainly encourage questions and answers from the floor. Perhaps what we can do to try and facilitate the best discussion is we ask for you to capture your questions, whether it be around a particular topic that we discuss or otherwise, and we'll enable and allow enough time at the end to answer any questions and queries. But I think the right place to start is, we've had a very brief introduction. But what I would like to do is to perhaps share why this particular topic resonates with us. So if I could perhaps ask Yuko to start, to talk a little bit about how this topic resonates with you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Yuko Nakahira. I'm a managing director of 3M Singapore. I started my career in product development engineer at 3M Japan, and then I decided to move into business. So I went to business school and became management consultant, working for McKinsey for several years, and then later came back to 3M as a business leader. Every day I'm very excited and motivated to work for an innovation company which really believes in and strives to improve every person's life through innovation. And as a business leader, that I am able to contribute to making a better workplace as well as develop people. So, why this topic resonates with me is that because I grew up in Japan, where there prevail not just unconscious bias, but very, explicit stereotyping, prejudice, etc. But I was able to build my career because, looking back, I feel that I was supported by some individuals who had less of that. In fact, they really helped me to gain my self-conscious. For example, my father, when I was a child, he constantly told me that girls are as good as boys, and you can be anything. Girls are not inferior. If you like math and science, you can be engineer, So I guess I believe that. And when I started working as a product development engineer at 3M, this is 3M Japan, so the colleagues were all men, and I was the only woman engineer in the lab, and every morning, women were assistants, so women were expected to clean up the desk for every employees, whereas men would do a stretch before the work. So the day one, I didn't know which I should do, and I sort of played safe. I started picking up cloth and started cleaning up, wiping the desks. But my supervisor said, "What are you doing? You have to come with us because you're an engineer." So, those little things, but I think it really made a big difference. And lastly, when I was in McKinsey, I was obliged to dissent, and I was just forced to do those things. That doesn't come very familiar to me. But looking back, I think these experiences did help me shape my career. So for that, I'm very passionate about this topic. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you, Yoko. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte Zeng, head of HR from Standard Chartered Bank. This topic resonates with me at a very structural level because time and time again, we talk about the loss of diversity, whether it's in terms of thought leadership or views or structure or structural culture and values in any society setup or work group or work unit, there's always a loss of that woman population. It's just a big structural gap. Whether you look at the supply side or the demand side, right? On the supply side, look at some of those IT jobs, I think some of you talked about it earlier, that young girls at the age of 9 to 15 don't necessarily think that they could sign up for IT courses or researchers roles in their 20s or 10 years down the road. And Madhavi just reminded me this is the best group that we should look at in terms of building their confidence, getting them to think about all the possibilities, right? Get them to know that while they shape their personality and their career interests, this is the age group that they can start thinking about that. And then if we shape them, we really bring the society to the next stage. So whether at the society level or at the work group level, I feel that when we miss this young population, we will continue to miss the entire work again for the next 20 years. So unconscious bias shouldn't be just focused in the workplace. Yes, we do a lot of training, mentoring, reaching out to a young woman for projects and so on. But it should start at a wider population and a wider age group right from the young. So that's why I'm very passionate about that.
Hi, everyone. I spent close to 20 years in financial services industry in a function that is typically male-dominated, in the front line, right? I mean, you will have read a lot of press about how you see segregation of women, there are more women in back office functions, fewer women in front office function. So I spent my entire career in, what is generally, relatively speaking, male-dominated. And I've also had the benefit of having spent half my career in the US. So not only was I a minority from a gender perspective, I was a minority in terms of ethnicity. And I have seen a lot of progress over the years, in the 20 years I've been in the industry, but very often, still today, I find myself the only woman in meetings at the table, right? Surrounded by men, of different ethnic background. So diversity is definitely close to my heart. I'm also a mother, and I have a daughter, and I see signs of unconscious bias, as Charlotte mentioned. It starts from a young age, and it affects one's, in my view, not just career paths, career choice. It starts from school, which is why this is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. I think we have made good progress, but there's still a lot to be done. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Lynette Clunies-Ross. I'm the VP of Strategy and Operations for Oracle. Why this topic resonates with me, in particular, the word stereotype resonates with me. I think because I made a very early conscious decision, probably before that, I should say, my mother made a very conscious decision for me not to be stereotyped. And she did that by streaming me into maths and science rather than the humanities. She did that by actually never teaching me how to cook or sew or do anything domestic, and I'm fortunate that I actually partnered with someone who's an excellent cook. But then I made a very early decision that I wouldn't be defined by the colour of my skin, by my gender, by my accent or my physical features. And that's really stood me in good stead, because I entered a very male-dominated field. I entered technology as a technologist. I started as a programmer, which was actually a minority profession. So it was a minority in a minority, and like I Ching, I found myself the only woman in the room. So it's a topic that continues. I continue to be passionate about. I love to challenge stereotypes, so I had a technical career. I moved into sales, and I have to say, I loved blowing away stereotypes in my sales career. And now I'm in a transformation role. I have a really fantastic opportunity to transform my organization. One of my strategic initiatives that I have ownership for with my EVP is sales culture transformation. And in doing that, we're trying to blow away stereotypes of how Oracle's perceived by its customers, and in doing that, we need to be representative of women and men as our customers are as well. So I'm delighted to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Leonard. I guess for my few cents on why it resonates with me, so I've been with Glanbia Performance Nutrition for about 5 years. As a company, it's the leading player within the sports nutrition sector, both globally and in Asia. This is a category that historically was very much geared towards those pictures that you see of the big man in gyms, working out, putting muscle on muscle. That's when I started with the organisation. Over that time, though, and there was a comment that was raised around the female economy, as a company, we realised that there is an enormous opportunity that we are missing, just by virtue of having a very narrow lens with which we look at how we can see the opportunity in the marketplace. So that then led ourselves to rethink about our marketing approach, because we could still see, and we knew scientifically there was a lot of benefit in the portfolio, in what we do, the products that we offer for women as well. It just needed to be positioned differently. There was still the issue around body health, there was still the issue around mental health that can be associated with living an active lifestyle. I think what's been so interesting in that journey is as we've moved that focus from a consumer point of view, as we've then looked in the last few years to expand our organisation across the region, historically we very much had sales marketing people in the organisation as being really how we grew our business. We've focused more in terms of rounding out other functions in areas like supply chain, in areas like financial controls, regulatory, R&D. These are not necessarily areas that I would say are as common a playing field for women to operate in as at least in my background's case. And what's been so good is by having a category that is now more familiar to women, more comfortable, more inviting, we're finding that people who are coming into interviews are actually interested in the category. They're interested to work in the category. And so what that does is it expands the pool of people that we have that we can choose from during the interview process. I'm very proud to say that today what we have in markets like China is our head of supply chain. It's a woman. Our regulatory lead, our R&D, our innovation. Again, areas that perhaps weren't the traditional domain, but has come about because of the focus that we have in realising that there is as much benefit to most of what we sell to women as there is to men, and therefore we need to be much more broader minded in terms of how we look at the market overall and the benefit that we can provide. So just in terms of my own personal journey with it. Moving on, I think we talk about at the forum of the Asian Women in Leadership Summit, and there was a comment that was made, I think, by Renu before around just how diverse this region is, from markets like China, which in some ways lead the diversity approach, to other markets as well. As we think about unconscious bias, as we think about prejudice and stereotypes, how much do we need to factor in the diversity that exists between one market and another country in a market like Asia? And then I'll ask you to then, and we'll go on to the next point, which is more about within Asia and outside of Asia. But how much do we need to factor in some of those things about which part of Asia as we think about trying to find solutions moving forward, bringing about positive change? Charlotte, perhaps from your point of view.
And clearly, I think Vinny talked about that, and Renu talked about that as well. So there's a clear difference within Asia, like you also mentioned. China and Indonesia, Philippines are actually progressive, and they're leading the way. Malaysia, Singapore, and so on are actually, there's a gap to catch up. So as an organization, I think we need to, or just in any context, right? I think there's a need to see the differences in degree, and therefore, just like different level of medicines, or different symptoms, or different level of illness, we prescribe different medicines and so on. So there is a need to see the differences. However, at the end of the day, it is still about helping people to understand unconscious bias or stereotype. Many a times when I see the conduct, so when people conduct the training, right, unconscious bias training to the senior managers and so on, everybody actually laugh at the video. They actually realize that they make exactly the same mistakes in those settings, in those scenarios, right? Whether it's in an interview scene, a male interviewer says something and then make a comment, or whether it's in a promotional decision, or whether it is a mentoring scene. So whatever background we are, whatever nationalities, there are still a huge underlying danger and risk of unconscious bias built in human being. So the continual support, I know Vinny was talking about, young girls are asking, oh, why are those men still talking about unconscious bias? Unfortunately, it's embedded in human being, and we need to learn to unlearn all this. So to me, whether there are nationalities differences, we still need to continuously build and remind people about this kind of stereotyping.
Yuko, from the context of say, a 3M being a global organization.
Right, so 3M being a multinational company, we do have all the statistics for each subsidiary in terms of the ratio of women, depending on the job grade, etc. And you can guess, you know, two of the lowest are Japan and Korea, unfortunately. But the 3M's expectation for each subsidiary is clear. So entitlement goal is clear. And so as a company, we don't lower the expectation because it's in a market where it's more male dominant. That said, approach and to it, or yeah, basically approach and also some content of the training about how firm you would be with this zero tolerance, etc. They may change, but I know that my colleagues in Japan, you know, mostly male colleagues, are really trying hard to figure out what they should do to really meet the target.
Yijing, taking a slightly different approach to it, so JP Morgan, again, operates globally. We talk about it from an Asian context in terms of the topic today, in terms of trying to address the unconscious bias. How much do we need to think about approaching it differently in Asia versus perhaps some of our organizations, how they do it in other parts around the world? Do we need to? How might we do it if we need to?
I think obviously as a global company, you know, there'll be a culture and policies that are rolled out, right? That, you know, signify what the company believes in, and we try to roll out various regions. I think, but I agree that that's a fundamental kind of issue, like you talk about, regardless of geography. But I do think that the reasons potentially could be different. You know, the causes of the lack of diversity or in the numbers that we see could actually vary for different reasons in the different countries, right? I mean, the basic one that people sometimes talk about is, for example, in Singapore, there's availability of childcare, right, from a domestic health perspective, and that is hugely important, you know, beneficial for women trying to balance a career and being a mother, and that may not be available in some other geographies. So there are, I think, circumstantial differences among geographies that we need to be aware of. But I think from a corporate perspective, I think fundamentally, frankly, I believe in the importance of at least making sure there's awareness of the issue, whether it's unconscious bias or stereotypes. And I think we're still continuing on the path, and this applies not just within my industry, I think across industries are trying to raise the awareness in men and women as well, across sectors.
Lynette, thoughts again, just building on the idea of Asia, global, how do we approach it differently, similarly, where might it occur?
I've been reflecting on this question because I'm new to Singapore. I've only been here for a year now, and started my career, and I was born in Australia. And I think, and I've always worked for global companies, IBM before, Oracle, and you know, I've made conscious decisions to join companies that do have a point of view and act on that around diversity and inclusion. And I think there's more that we have, more issues that we have in common than not. And I think if we can all lean into that common problem, which I think is, I'm sure there's country differences and geographic differences, but really we're all facing the same issue. It doesn't matter whether it's 15 to 20%, it's that range where we've kind of hit that ceiling, if you like, and how do we all lean into where we get the next 20 to 30% from, I think is more helpful than thinking about why we're different. Yeah.
To the panel, obviously, a workforce is made up of males and females, and we recognise the importance that both play in terms of driving the improvement that we need to make around unconscious bias, prejudice and stereotypes. But do we need to do more? Do we need to do a lot more in terms of actually tailoring the education and the education to both groups? Because I think the approach and the impact that comes from each is different. So again, are we doing enough in that space? Or are we tending to do a little bit of a blanket approach where we think that we talk about it around diversity and about unconscious bias, etc. But are we tailoring the message enough to both groups in order to bring about more impact in each that's required to move the agenda forward? Charlotte?
The answer clearly is no, right? Not enough. So I think we need to do a lot more at different levels. And I like what Vinny has said, right? To actually set some hard quota. So sometimes when education doesn't help, training and development doesn't help, then maybe setting some hard quota. So we actually set some hard quota on senior women recruitment in the senior leadership team. So it cascades down, right? So if a senior MD is tasked to recruit, to fulfill X% of women in his top team, and then it cascades down. So I think some kind of education in terms of hard quota is important. And also we believe in educating the male and the woman, including women, by the way, in the way of interviewing. We encourage them to look at full suite of women candidates. And we're talking about senior women hiring here. And I realized that I made a mistake. So I made a mistake 2 years ago when I asked my team to put in a few women candidates. And guess what? When they passed through the 5 rounds of interview, when that one woman survived to the end of the interview, she becomes a token. So that's not a good sign. And I realized that, and I said, okay, most in a panel, or rather in a slate, it should be at least 80% women in that slate. So continuous education in this form of hard quota, hard POI, processes, operating processes will help. Even in a promotion setting, salary adjustment setting, last year end we did an internal survey, or not survey, internal analytics, and we realized that women leaders make more stringent salary decision and promotion decision on their women staff members. You got that? Women decision makers make more stringent salary increase and promotion decision on their women staff members. So we got a shock, right? And it's unconscious bias. We talked about that and we brought to the work group and to the senior team. And then we addressed that. So what we do now is we actually have an equal pay charter launch early this year. And we also wanted to make this kind of tough education, and we put this into the agenda and into the objectives of the, not just women leaders, but to the top team. So definitely education to the decision makers through the interview process, through the promotion process. Now also education to the young women, right? So we have no problem in recruiting young women. We have no problem in recruiting senior women. Now we have the problem promoting women, getting them to believe and be very confident that they can do a lot more for themselves. So in our mentoring program or any program, we actually encourage them to shout about their ability. Someone just said that, right? So in a scale of 10, a woman, even at a scale of 7, she tends to believe that she's at a scale of 3, and she talks about 3. And men is the other way around, who is more confident, right? So this kind of education should just continue. And in fact, in my own mentoring, I'm now mentoring a young lady, and I have to remind her, talk about her sales outcome to her boss, talk about her career interest to her boss, and of course she's progressing. But these are just education, whether at the broad level, or at the team level, or the individual level. Whether it's hard code or soft code, it just had to be multi-pronged. Okay. Sorry, it takes a long answer, but yeah, we have not done enough.
I understand. Just taking the point, and Lynette, I'll pass it to you. For example, we saw the numbers before around the proportion of, unfortunately, only the 15 or 20%, for example, at board level and at senior management level, those kinds of numbers, which unfortunately speaks to the fact that most of the roles are being dominated by males. You take me in my situation. I'm looking after a region. How would I be educated? And how would peers of mine, how should we be educated as men in terms of trying to improve that situation? How can we be educated more specifically? Because it's almost like that's the majority of the people that need to be educated in some instances.
I wanted to move beyond the education topic a little bit because I think training is really, really important. Obviously, and I think many of the forward-looking corporations have introduced training in unconscious bias. I think if you use the term unconscious bias, you know, most leaders know what you're talking about. At Oracle, we offer it more generally to everybody, but we also embed it in our recruiting process with our hiring managers. And I was at an event last Tuesday in Sydney, our Oracle Cloud event, and we had a speaker from our Human Capital Management Product Development group. And it was something that she said about process that I thought, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. Because in corporations, our bias is embedded in our processes, right? Our HR processes in particular. And processes, in my view, maintain the status quo. So if you don't change your process, you won't change the status quo. So training is really, really important and needs to be not just one-off, but reinforced in many forums. But I think we really have to look hard at our processes, and Charlotte mentioned, you know, introducing merit-based selection processes, and setting targets. I mean, those are all things that we have to do in our processes, and that's, I think, where we can really make a difference.
I think I absolutely agree. I think one of the speakers earlier talked about how you could have policies, but they could just be policies and not enforced, right? I think process is a similar element. We are dealing with a situation where decision-making is dominated by men, and assuming that the men, and I think there has been a lot of education, so they get that as an issue. So we think about processes, and some of the things that we've talked about internally at JP Morgan as well is, for example, making sure that the interview slate, you know, the interviewers consists always of women, right? Like you have some representation. And another topic I want to bring in that's linked to process, there's a school of thought that people that sometimes say, if you're most organizations will pride themselves on being meritocracies, right? Whoever delivers the results as defined by a certain set of KPIs should be the ones getting promoted. I think there should be a discussion around who sets the KPIs, what kind of KPIs, how do you evaluate? Because ultimately KPIs are written, the interpretation, because it's rarely just a number, right? It's a set of qualities. How are they defined? How are they then interpreted in performance review sessions, all of that? I think we need to be very conscious of that, because at every juncture, in the setting of the KPIs, in the evaluation of performance, in committees, all that, they tend to be male-dominated. So the perspective needs to hopefully reflect the fact that there could exist, you know, certain biases, and we should try to consciously correct that.
So in addition to, you know, education and policies and all that, I think it's very important for the management team to own the issue, to really understand, you know, that we do have issues. So in 3M Singapore, I'm very fortunate to say that in my leadership team, more than 50% are women. So we are very good there. But when we look across in our manufacturing supply chain, we have less women representation. So today I have a group of team sitting there, and we have, you see those gentlemen who are actually running the operation. So we own this issue together and try to work together, you know, what can be done to have more women engineers in the workplace.
Very good. Thank you. We come from a corporate point of view. We work for corporations. The majority of the people in this room are from corporations. But how much do we need to go beyond the workforce if we want to make progress in this area around unconscious bias, prejudice, stereotypes? How far do we need to go? And linked to that is then obviously the further that we move out, the less direct influence that we have. We can probably affect more change within where we are working versus those that are, say, third party to us. How can we do, what are some of the things that we can do in that area?
So I shared my stories, right? That those individuals who continuously encouraged me actually made me where I am today. So I think it's very important for each of us to do that, to encourage others beyond the workplace. And as a company, 3M has been running science outreach activities for more than 10 years. That is to provide an opportunity for young students to seek to inspire a love of science and engineering. So it's a science camp thing. And hopefully if we can also influence the perception of parents. So these are the things that I think as a company we can do, and we would love to continue to be doing.
Charlotte, some thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Yoko totally. So influencing beyond, like the husbands, like the social network, like UN, Mother V is here, like others, other women association, I think that's key. The other part that goes back to my earlier point is about the education institutions, right? So the primary schools, before the girls reach their PSLE, and of course, we have a very interesting T-score for those who know about the PSLE system in Singapore. It's a T-score concept, which is just going to be removed effective this year, going to a banding. In the old days, this T-score concept has got more girls to get into the national university, but then, end of the day, more girls went into the non-engineering discipline, right? But if we can influence the educators, and by the way, I also spoke with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Education and Ministry of Manpower, and just to share my view. So the idea that I'd like to advocate is to speak to the young girls at their age, at their PSLE stage, before they make a decision which school they want to go to, which discipline they want to, give them the confidence that they can be an astronaut, they can be an IT expert, and that. So get people to believe in that, and then open up their possibilities. Get them to attend companies, whether go have a tour at Oracle or have a tour at, I don't know, we can't possibly go to the space center in the US, but creating some kind of awareness for the young girls to see the possibilities and then enlarge their horizon. Something that we have to start at a very young age, and something that we have to educate the parents at home, the daddies, the teachers, the male teachers, and so on, and the CEOs, the male CEOs, and so on, together build that concept, build to say that we have 50 years horizon in building this journey.
You mentioned it before, financial services historically been a very male-dominated environment, in many ways still is. If we think about universities, and if we think about so much of the hiring, obviously, that organisations do straight from graduate programs, how can we influence that to try and encourage more women to be interested in careers like that, even at universities? What can we do with universities to try and change some of that?
A few things. I think first is to let students and candidates and education institutions know that we don't just hire narrowly from a specific discipline in university. So a student in studying literature, right, could be a banker, and that is the way we view things, because you get gender differences, the ratios look different. You may see more girls in the more humanities, science, disciplines versus more engineering technical background. So that's one thing, broadening our candidate pool. One. Second, having female targeted recruitment events. Right? And so we have hosted very successfully in our offices where these are sophomores, not necessarily immediately seeking for job candidates, listening to male and female bankers talk about what banking is like. And I think third is the good thing about a firm like JP Morgan is we offer different tracks, right? When you go into banking, it's not just one specific what I do. You could do various different things. So the good things, I think, within Singapore, the Singapore office, we're very, very positive, encouraging statistics from a gender split perspective. And we'll continue, hopefully, making progress there.
Well, I think as large global corporations, we obviously employ thousands of people around the world, and we can make a real difference in what we do as employers. And Oracle's no different to the corporations represented here, in that we have We have an Oracle Women's Leadership Movement. We are a global sponsor of, platinum sponsor, I think, of the Grace Hopper Women in Technology conferences. This year we were the global sponsor of the International Women's Day, and we don't just treat those as internal corporate events. We externalize those events in each country with the community, with volunteers, etc. So those movements are great. But the issue we have is at the pipeline stage, when we're hiring women into technology, there just aren't enough women. And so we've got to have government and education systems, really be bringing that pipeline through. And it's great that governments are acknowledging now STEM is really, really important for women in STEM, but I think that's almost become overhyped. I go back to basics, which is we need to have more women not opting out of maths and science. And in Australia, it's not just women, but boys are opting out as well. And our system is encouraging them to do that. So, I go back to those basic subjects that are really, really important for women, even though we offer a diversity of tracks as well. I mean, you join Oracle, you can move into sales, you can move into HR and all of these things, but for women in technology in particular, we need to start a lot earlier. Thanks.
I know that we're running out of time, so what I'll do is just open it out to the floor. Have a distinguished panel of women in leadership, so any questions that we have from the floor?
Hi, just on the technology path and in trying to get ahead of the curve, right? Artificial intelligence, right? And how bias could get coded, right, for another generation or two. If you could opine on that, please.
Wow. That's why we need more women in IT. It's an interesting topic, and if you think of AI as software programming, and you think, well, men are doing the programming, therefore they're going to be building in unconscious bias into the decision making. I actually look at it differently, and it's not until I really came to this realization that it's the data that does the programming. So our data has to be as unbiased as it possibly can be, with a lot of data, so that it doesn't introduce bias, because AI is really about the data doing the programming, and then ultimately making very important decisions about our lives in the future. So we need more female data scientists, I think, is the answer to that. Yeah.
Maybe one last question if there is. Sorry, two last questions.
So this one's to you, Sam. You asked all the women panelists, how can males be educated? But I think we'd like to know what kind of interventions would men be most open to? Because we keep talking about training and getting you into a room with a specific topic so that we can ease you into it.
Yeah.
But how would you think about being called out?
Okay.
Organizations that say, we're going to start calling out in the meetings when there is this. How would men take to that?
Okay. So for me, one of the most powerful things the most informative discussion I had on this topic came 2 days ago when we had a call with the ladies, and we were discussing what are the topics that we're going to discuss. And one of the things that came through was in talking about some of the topics, etc. And I'll come back and answer the question, but just as an example, a point was raised around one of the big challenges that exists, and it was reinforced in some of the earlier discussions this morning, was when a woman goes into not an interview, when it goes for a performance review, they tend to be less forthcoming with what they want, what they believe they should get, okay, versus males. Now, what that does in the process is that it probably puts them at a disadvantage for a particular promotion opportunity internally if they're just shy. Not that they don't think that they deserve, if they're just shy in terms of the way they come forward. It made me think, as we go into performance reviews and mid-year and things like that, it then plants that in my head, okay? Perhaps I should have thought about it beforehand, but at least now it's planted in my head that when I go and I'm not interviewing, when we're going through performance reviews, etc., and someone says, I want this role, I'm kind of conscious of the fact that, all right, that doesn't mean that a lady is any less ambitious. It's just probably less prone to be as demanding at the table. So either I've got a responsibility to try and elicit out of her to get a better sense of that, or at least accept the fact that I'm going to have a discussion that is probably going to come across a little bit more subtly if there's a woman in the room versus potentially a man. I don't want to generalize and say all men either, so let's not generalize it the other way. But that's probably will come through. The point being is that I get that benefit and insight from being in a discussion like this. So at a minimum, we all need to be involved with more discussions. Now, the best way to make those, and I'm talking from a male point of view, the best way to be involved in those discussions, there does need to be some level of mandating in order, because you need to free up the time. You need to be participating in these discussions to learn. So you will only learn if you are involved in something. So I think there needs to be some level of, now again, whether we would call this an education session for me or not, you can debate whether it's education or engagement or involvement, but involvement is key. We need to incorporate it into what we do as managers, in the same way that we need to do a certain amount of training around various systems or various other things. We need to embody this. And if we do, our understanding of issues becomes higher. And if we're understanding issues, you cannot solve an issue unless you understand the issue first. So understanding of issues is the first point, but I think it does need to be mandated. Mandated is within companies that says, look, you need to spend this much time, because that's the starting point. Sometimes you have to make compulsory to get adoption. Okay, sorry, there was one last question here.
So, since most of you are key decision makers, hi. We heard about broadening talent, which is great, which means somebody from literature can move into tech or banking, right? I was wondering, what about tech people, right? You want more and more people to join tech, but you don't want them to broaden out to other branches. Maybe that's one of the reasons why a lot of women drop out from engineering careers, because the broadening doesn't really happen. Just one, so a lot of people are afraid to learn the maths and science simply because it's going to be a hardcore tech career. So that's something that I wanted to see. What's your view on it?
Not necessarily agree with that, because like at 3M, a lot of senior leaders have a technical background, not just from the academic point of view, but really being an engineer and R&D. So we do rotate people across if it's their passion. So we don't regard technical people to just stay in technical, and we believe that providing opportunities is the biggest learning experience that a company can give to employees.
I think you're talking from the supply side. So let me see it from the demand side, right? So if we set up a culture or promote a culture where, let's say women who stay in technology function, IT function, can progress to a MD level or even higher level, then if we assure that kind of career path and improve that kind of career path, then I don't see why they need to change their career path. Of course, some along the way, like me, like other people may change their career interest along the way. That's fine. Anyone is free to change their career interest. But if we ensure a good hygiene environment, then and a good workplace to work, then that demand question should be solved. The question today is still about the supply side, that we don't see enough young women participating in the workforce, joining the IT field or the AI field, right? So we're still, I think there are two problems here, supply rather than the demand. In fact, if I were to look at here, right, and Arvind said that earlier, and April said that as well. So if by the day when we see 50% of this room being occupied by men, then we will celebrate and we'll claim success. You know why? That's when the time when the whole society, you and I, we come from different parts of the world and different kind of, different walk of life or different profession. But if 50% of this room is made of men, that means 50% of, men out there, 50% of them are actually aware of that, and they're able to build career path for women in technology. They're able to build recognition for women. So it's more about getting more men willing to set up their context for for young women, whether in IT industry or in IT jobs or any other jobs?
Right, look, a few people have asked to wind up. So look, I think what we'll do, I'm sure that Lynette, I Ching, Charlotte and Yuko will be around for a little bit of time. So I'm sure if you have any questions, please approach them. But if we could have a round of applause for the panelists.